What's going on, everybody? Can I get a mic check 1 2 1 2? Let me know if the audio is level here, and we will get this show on the road. I really want to thank Robert from In Deep Geek coming here to be our tokenist for us, and I will pull up the chat to make sure that we got the A-OK. And please be critical, people. Don't say it sounds good and have me pull it down later because it was atrocious. So, let me know. But Robert, introduce yourself. And let everybody know what's going on. Gray areas in the chat. We got Richard Hope, Danny McKay. We got AU Pack Mule. We got the whole gang here. So it's the times of old. Robert, if anybody's been living in the Shire, let them know where they can find you.
I do live in the Shire. Yeah. It is an honor and a pleasure to be back here, Justin. We've been collaborating on and off for 3 years now, and it's always a pleasure to be here. So yeah, if we're talking here about Tolkien, then I'm definitely in for this, and the chat is already of an exceptionally high caliber, I have to say.
No, it really is, and you bring that soiree to it all. So we're going to be talking about, to be honest, our first only author, because George R.R. Martin, we had the lovely and the fantastic Gray Area on for, but let's face it, we talked a lot about his screen work as well, because he's a screenwriter. He did it for Beauty and the Beast and a few other series. So Tolkien is truly our first author, and this series is coming to an end. Yeah, woe is me and all that. But we are going to be talking about how his literary prowess, how his prose, and how his poetic sense and cadence comes across. And I can't think of anybody better to segue us from Song of Ice and Fire to the world of J.R.R. Tolkien than my guest here today. We're going to take all of the Jackson films. I like them. Where they are, I like them, and we're gonna set them aside, and we're gonna talk about how Tolkien tells his story. Do you want to give us a little bit of background on Tolkien? I'm kind of putting you on the spot here, Robert, but just for anybody that needs to be brought up to speed about where he comes from and how he gets started.
Yeah, well, I mean, I don't think anyone needs an introduction to his work, but in terms of who he is, he was born in South Africa, but then at the age of 3, he moved across to England. And he was, from a very young age, he was excited and interested in language, and he started not just learning new languages but inventing new languages, and that moved on into inventing worlds, and that moved on to inventing stories within those worlds. So that is what we've got going on here. Is we've got somebody who, you get many authors these days who have different creations, lots of different stories in different places. Tolkien's life's work was all about this legendarium, this world of Arda, of Middle-earth, Lord of the Rings, all of this fitting together. So what we've got is a complete, or as near as we can get to complete, vision from one man as to sort of an act of creation.
Absolutely. He's a philologist, which I think we did a stream about 1.5 years ago where I cannot say that word. And this is somebody that has studied the creation of language in the way in which it's formed and the meaning behind words, which I find to be fascinating. This is a well-learned man, and this is a man that went through a lot of transitions in his own life. And you see that in his work, from World War I to his community kind of being deforced, taken away the... He is not a modernist, to say the least. But, his work is very poetic. And I said this to Robert before I started. The one thing that really sticks out to me, and I put the PDF in the chat, is this essay right here. It's about 28 pages. And this is his take on the fairy story and how he looks at escapism. And this is very prevalent to what we do today with everything that's going on in the world. We don't necessarily escape from the world issues. We go off world to hear these stories. It's truth devoid of fact. And I think Tolkien really embraced that. And that's kind of what I wanted to start with you, Robert, because The Hobbit was his first literary works, but it was said to be too poetic. It was said to be, not viable for a wide audience. And really until The Fellowship, he didn't get any recognition or any really literary, agents or anything like that. But he was very critical about the analysis of fairy tales and Beowulf in particular, which I'll also link. And I think that he's a man that really saw the value of truth devoid of fact. Would you say that's accurate, or this escapism isn't just leaving everything behind, it's looking at our truths in a different way.
Yeah, it is. So his view was on that essay you've got there on fairy tales. It's that yes, what we have in terms of fairy tales, it can offer us escapism, and that is not just a bad thing. We sometimes think of escapism as being a bad thing these days. He compares it to being like a prisoner in a prison, and he says the prisoner is not bound to only think about those walls surrounding him. The prisoner's imagination can run wild and go and visit other places, and that is one of the wonders of escapism. Is it allows you not to be where you are. Another thing that he said about fairy tales, he had three main points in that. So another thing is about this idea of the sort of the getting satisfaction and happy. I mean, we think of it now as like the Hollywood ending, but like the happy ending to a story that allows us. It gives us hope. It gives us something to aim for. It gives us something in our own lives that we can look forward to and transform ourselves. And then finally, if you create in a story, if you create an alternate reality that is internally coherent, that allows us to understand it, that through that we can critically reflect on ourselves and our own world. It's not an analogy, but it's allowing us to address issues in our own world by looking at a different world. And that he thought that was absolutely fundamentally important to the role of story.
And I want to touch on your second and third point there, beautifully put, that there is this Deus Ex Machina sense, but it is not, right? This solving of the issues, but it doesn't dismiss the peril, the threat in which he invokes. And I'm blanking on the verb here for it that he puts in this beautiful essay here. But he really, embraces the fact of there is hope, but there's also the threat of failure. Not everything's got a Steven Spielberg bow on it. Not everything's, wrapped up and put into a box of candies there. But at the same time, he's showing a real threat, and he's really embracing the story of the fairy. And again, I think it's just truth devoid of fact. And I've said this before in our channel. I think I've said this before in a Tolkien stream with you like 2 years ago, that the longer or the more detached this story is from our contemporary environment, the longer it can live in our world, because it's not so attached to the politics and everything that's going on. It's a deeper truth. It's a macro view that I think he touches on. So it's not, I don't think we should look at this as just like blanket statement of good versus evil or anything like that. I think Tolkien really saw the power of story, and he really embraced it, because as we see with his friend C.S. Lewis, he didn't like the way in which he told story, for better or worse. It doesn't mean he's right, but he truly felt this was important. And obviously, in the internet age and the data and technological age that we're in right now, in having your channel, my channel, and everybody else's channel, we know the power of it, right? We know the power of story, and he took it quite seriously. And I think he had quite a bit of foresight into what's going to happen. So yeah, he has this excellent essay on the fairy tale, and then he has another essay on Beowulf, which he will go on to not really appreciate the essays on him, but let it be known that Beowulf was not a mandatory literary source for curriculum throughout the United States until Tolkien did this. So he really actually added a lot to us, whether you know it or not. He really did embrace education and all that. So when we get into Tolkien, obviously we face a little bit of this dichotomy. We face a little bit of this good versus evil, and it's so plain and all that. What would you say to that? Because I don't agree to that, Robert. I don't agree that it's all just so plain good versus evil. I see a lot more depth in his work.
Well, absolutely. And the more you dig into it, the more you see this. It's there at a sort of a macro level and also a micro level. So you get characters that you say, okay, let's take Gollum. Is Gollum a good character or an evil character? Well, he's a bit of both. He's somebody that you have sympathy for as a character. What about Frodo? Yes, he's a good guy, but he's also Spoiler alert: he's also a failure, and he is tempted, and he gives in to temptation at the end of it. And so all the way through this, we get lots of layers. You do not get this fundamental good versus evil battle. And when you get to the end, in fact, George R. R. Martin has said, when he talks about the ending of Song of Ice and Fire, and you know that word we always use because he's used it, bittersweet.
Yeah.
That actually is him talking about the end of the Lord of the Rings. He sees the end of the Lord of the Rings as bittersweet, and then he goes off on this explanation of what he means by that. But basically, as just to take one example, Frodo. Yes, Frodo, not through his own strength, but he does succeed. But he cannot live to enjoy and appreciate what happened, the fruits of his victory. His ending is bittersweet because he's there. We saw him towards the end of the Lord of the Rings. If you just imagine him in the films, he's not a happy hobbit, is he? He's been profoundly burned, blackened, broken by this whole experience. And that is what makes it bittersweet, is that it's not that the heroes go off and are suddenly magically wonderful and happy and all the rest of it at the end of it. They have been traumatized by what has happened to them. And that is where we get this kind of layered approach. Actually, the more you dig into this story, the less you see it as being this fundamentally black against white kind of narrative.
Yeah, absolutely. And I feel that there's obviously virtues to both works, and George would have never written if it wasn't for Tolkien. Tolkien wouldn't have written if it wasn't for a stream of consciousness and all these things that really brought him along and inspired him, and all of these horrible events that he had to go through, like World War I and the Somme and so forth. So it's appreciating these works in isolation, especially, and then so forth to how they inspire going on. We wouldn't have George R. R. Martin, and whoever the next name is, we wouldn't have them without George. And I think it's important to remember that and not simplify. Yes, there's a lot of talk of, it was just black and white, blah, 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 good and bad. And it's really not. It's really much more to it. And there's a lot of reward to have from reading these journeys, especially in this COVID we're not law. Maybe martial law, but lol. Yeah, we're looking for new things to read. If you guys have not read The Fellowship, read it. It's a wonderful book, and it stands up to the time, and that's what Tolkien does with his secondary worlds and his sub-creation. And I truly think that these are stories that can definitely take meaning far beyond the contemporary times. So what I notice is that he does something similar, and we're going to use a lot of Song of Ice and Fire references because I think they're definitely applicable to those that are watching, and me and Robert as well, is that, George uses a lot of children's POVs, right? Perspective. I think that Tolkien, from his works, from what I've read, I see a lot of the least informed person in a situation, which that's what you get when you have a child in your POV. Now he uses the hobbits. They're not as informed about everything as you'd think. They're much more virtuous and stuff like that. And I see a style to his writing that is very clever, and it kind of escapes, as much as he's known for like going along with because he kind of set the tropes, but he also kind of escapes them as well with the hobbits and stuff like that, of having the least informed person in any given situation being your perspective, or whether it's Sam or so forth. Any thoughts on his writing style with that, of giving us pretty much exposition in a natural way? Because that's what a child does. That's what Bran does. That's what, that's how Song of Ice and Fire handles it. Everybody that's pushed into a leadership position is the least qualified person to be pushed into.
Yeah, I'm going to pick up, if it's okay, on that thing you talked about, tropes. Because
the 5 points beyond of where, go ahead.
He creates the tropes. You're right. When we think of an elf in fantasy literature, we think of Legolas. Mm-hmm. When we think of a dwarf, we think of Gimli. Those are they're the tropes. But having created that, he immediately, in our modern parlance, he immediately subverts it. Just take Gimli as a random example. If you get Gimli, then he creates this idea of this dwarf who's humorless, who hates elves, who just wants to be burrowing underground, mining, who's grumpy, set in his ways. And then once he's established that, he immediately makes Gimli do the exact opposite of everything you want. He becomes friends with an elf. He becomes known as Gimli the elf friend. He goes out and tries new things. He tries lember spread. He sees beauty in forests. He's the one who goes off with Legolas finally off in a boat to the west. He is a dwarf, and yes, he creates this trope of what it is to be a dwarf in a fantasy world. But the moment that that is established, Tolkien immediately subverts it and shows us that that does not have to be the way.
Yes, and it's really brilliantly written. It really is. It is something that you can read time and time again, just like A Song of Ice and Fire. But I believe the more and more that you look into Lord of the Rings and the Fellowship, that you will have more and more enjoyment, especially if you go into it with this abstract view, or the view that's not really abstract anymore. It's like, oh, it's just good and evil. You'll find layers, and you'll be like, wait a minute, it's not like that. There's so many layers here. And I believe that, this is one thing I always push on this channel is agency over the story. Dan and Dave don't get to tell you that Danny is evil. Okay, their motivations for this character can split from the grip to the person playing it. You consume literature, you consume this medium, this visual medium, and you make up your own decision. You have agency over what you believe and don't believe. So it's like, take in what you take in. Don't ever let this information steamroll you. And I think Tolkien is so open to that, and he leaves it open to it. He definitely is stuck in his ways, and he does have a long history of avoiding allegory. And I'd like to touch on that with you, because I've heard you speak about it quite a few times. This allegorical take. A lot of people will look at allegory and say, well, it's not allegory, it doesn't have a message. And I've just, not to be contradictory. Yeah, I've just said, like, you do have agency over the message, and nobody can tell you you're wrong about how you feel, because your feelings are a fact. They're not up for debate, unless you're dead. But, at the same time, just because it's not allegorical, like, Narnia, per se, his pal's book, it definitely has messages. Would you say that's fair? That it's not devoid of message. It's just more open for interpretation, not a direct allegorical take on literature.
Yeah, so he didn't like allegory, a one for one, this means that.
Mm-hmm.
What he liked was applicability. He wanted to create a story that we could take lessons from. Now, he was open in saying, of course, no writer can ever be completely devoid of their putting their own background, their passions, their understandings into their work. But as much as he possibly could, he tried to strip out that and create something where the story itself allows us to dig into it and pull stuff out, and we see this in today's culture when something happens and then somebody puts up a clip from one of the films of that great speech from Sam about stories, or something about leaving the Shire, or one of the things that Gandalf says. All of these things, they're wisdom for the ages, and they can be applied to many different occasions, and that was what he was wanting. Yes, he had things that he was personally passionate about. The environment and not industrializing the world was something that clearly was there as part of him, and also the horrors of war. You cannot go through what he went through without it sort of staining what you create. But he tried as best as he could to create something that we could, in whatever situation we're in, we could draw lessons for ourselves. This wasn't just him doing his catharsis onto paper and saying this is that and that is that and all the rest of it. He was very castigating of C.S. Lewis. They were good friends, obviously, but he was very castigating of this idea that you would read it simply that you could go, Aslan, wow, Aslan's Jesus. I hadn't realized that. Therefore, whatever. That for him did not work. He did not ever want people to be able to look at his work and go, well, this character over here, that is clearly him talking about such and such a person or a concept or anything like that. He wanted the story itself to be something that we could live through. And that, to go to a slightly more conceptual level, that he wanted initially, as his aim, was to create a mythology for the English people in the same way that you had the Norse mythology, in the same
Mm-hmm.
way that you had Greek mythology and all the rest of it. This was his idea, was to create a mythology. And the idea of mythology is that these are tales that yes, they might teach lessons, but you could learn from them whoever you are, wherever you are, and the applicability of them is universal. So that was what he was trying to do, was to create something which was universally applicable, rather than specific to a specific time and instant.
Stripped of contemporary politics,
Yeah.
because I think he saw the Arthurian tales, especially, right, as being problematic in some senses. Rising of this culture, that culture within what is now your country. But like all of this, these tales that definitely could be taken in a very far-fetched ideological path that he saw is disadvantageous to what is really powerful. It's more about moralistic views and ethical issues. And I think that C.S. Lewis, there's kind of a double-edged sword. He kind of took an atheist, his pal, and made him a believer, but not a believer in the sense that Tolkien would have liked him to be a believer. He did subscribe to a different path as far as his spirituality. And he looked at Narnia, and he looked at the way in which stories were consumed in a very powerful way, and I think rightfully so. And he found it to be a little bit dangerous. He never wanted people to say, like you said, this is Jesus Christ in this story, which you can take Narnia, and it's an allegorical tale. It truly is. But just because Tolkien, and he's so adamant about it, not being allegorical, if you read his notes with Lewis, you'll see the back and forth about how much he tried to separate himself. And I know this myself. The more and more you try to separate yourself from something, the more and more you can fall into it. But he was, very respectful of the medium, and you have to take that in. I just don't like that people don't see a message in. You do have agency over the consumption and the message that you take from a story, but it doesn't mean anything, and everything is just meaningless and so forth. I feel that if people, when they hear that it's not allegorical, they think it doesn't mean anything. I think that's a common misconception that I see on this platform a lot. And I think that it's just important to take note of what you just said much better than I did. That it still means something. It just means something that's a deeper truth. It doesn't stick to this time or that time. It survives longer after. And we've been talking a lot about directors and producers, and everybody on this storyteller series has really opened my eyes to cinematography and the way in which they use visual mediums. Now, Tolkien is not that, but there is a cadence to prose, meaning a rhythm, the way in which he writes his stories. Like I said, The Hobbit was known as being too poetic at the time, in those times. They said it would never work. But I really think that, you see a lot of artwork and a lot of paintings, which I'll put up on screen, that you have Tolkien. And there's a lot of debate about if he had these visuals before he had the story, or if it was inspired for him. Is there anything that you found that stood out within his works, especially, when you have the story about his wife that he made up, Lucian and...
Aaron and Luthien, yeah.
Yeah, there you go. I was waiting. yeah, thank you. But, like he had this visual in his mind that he wanted to convey, and this was before contemporary photography, right? Like this is before it was normal that everybody had. My dad's a photographer. He take pictures of trees all day long, but he painted, and he had painters paint for him, and these visuals drove his medium, and he definitely had a visual sense to his stories that his prose invoked. And I think that that's really something to look upon with a lot of gratitude and a lot of respect. This guy was able to transmit this through this non-visual medium. But I think that we all kind of knew, whether we knew it or not, about the Shire if you read those books before those films came out.
Yeah, absolutely. And there is a musicality to what he writes, not just in the songs. There are lots of songs dotted around there, but it's it's actually the thing that strikes me, because his POV, if you will, does shift around from various characters, and we hear the different characters not just speak but also sing their songs. And what you'll find is that their songs express who they are, not just in what they are talking about, but in the in your language in the cadence of what they're saying. So you get Bilbo's songs are very simple and straightforward and about hearth and home and all the rest of it. When you get the Elvish songs, they are a lot more lyrical. They feel a lot more fantastical. They're historical and all the rest of it. And so what he does is he grounds all of the different characters in who they are. Now, what I think is the important point here is when you're talking about sort of, yes, it's sort of a visual thing. He actually takes 100 steps back in a way that almost no author nowadays can do, because he's quoted as saying, wisely, I started with a map. That's where he did. He started with the map, then he created the legends, then he created the languages themselves. That blows my mind to start with, but he didn't just create Elvish, he created several different types of Elvish, and lots of different languages that work in and of themselves that reflect the culture of those people. So once you've built up that huge bank of knowledge and history and legend and information about everyone, then suddenly it's a lot easier to those people on a page, because you know who they are, where they're coming from. You can tell who says something by the words they say and the way they say it.
The order in which it's said.
Exactly. Even before you see who it is. So when Sam speaks, it is so different to when Aragorn speaks, which is so different to even when Frodo speaks. You get this kind of class system within the Hobbits that we don't analyze all that much. But Sam and Frodo have a different speech pattern each. And in terms of the visuals, yes, I suspect he did.
Yes, that's what I'm saying. Like he would storyboard.
I was still there. Okay, I'm back.
It was all about illusion. It was all about illusion.
Hi, Tony.
Hi, Tony. Yeah, it was all about like, can you see me? Can you see me too? Which should have definitely.
You're
been
in the middle of a wonderful little speech as well.
All I'm gonna say is that when we look at storyboarding within directors and how I talk about it's so important that you separate screenwriters from producers and directors do more than just say where to put the camera and tell the actors what to do. That doing an over the shoulder shot, doing a perspective, changing your palette within tones and color can convey sentiment in a subliminal way. This is what Tolkien was doing. Tolkien didn't think I'm storyboarding. He wasn't doing that. And not to take anything away from Ridley or anything like this, but this is kind of like the genesis of this. Like, this guy was an artist. He wasn't just a poet. He wasn't just a linguist. He was also an artist in the way of he could visualize these things. And I think that really comes through in his prose. It really does. The way in which he writes is, I don't think it's matched, at least within fantasy. I really don't. I really don't think you can read anything in contemporary fantasy. It can be more raw, it can be more gritty, but there's this poetic sense. And I on Twitter today, I just kept tweeting out different poems I was finding from him. It really inspired me. And now George will give you what inspires that, like these stories about these guys. And I love that. But I love that as well. But that's just different. It's not better. It's not worse. It's just different. And it's a different way to appreciate it. And bless him for doing that. Because we have had Tolkien. So he gives us something a little bit different. It's like, do you like ice creams or hamburgers? Like, well, I want both. You know what I mean? They're not just going to eat ice cream, like some glutton. You know what I mean? So, yeah. But I'm happy I'm back. And what's up, Tony Teflon? But what I was going towards there, I think, hold on, let me get back on track here, is the way in which he created story and what his story should mean to us, especially the way in which he conveys them, because he's so adamant about this. Not allegorical, it's not like this. And now we've kind of got in this sense of, well, that's the old school way to go about it. But we see now with Amazon coming out with $1 billion series, which I guess with your shooting rockets up in there, that $1 billion isn't that much, but it's a unheard of amount of money. That what is old is new again. And I really, truly hope that they stick to Tolkien's vibe and they stick to what he really put on that page. Because if you're going to turn something into this visual medium and you're looking just to replicate the narrative that's on page, why are you making it visual? So, like, what is your prediction for these series? What do you think we'll see that Tolkien has inspired besides George, which I think everybody watching, like you said, is well aware of?
Yeah, well, this is fascinating in terms of what we're going to see, because they've got the rights to the second age of Middle Earth. And for those who are slightly less nerdy than me, what that means is all of the stuff that we know about the Lord of the Rings, the Hobbits, Gandalf, all of that. That's we're not going to see any of that. This is way back in history before this. So yes, there are obviously some of the elves are still around. We get Elrond and Galadriel and all the rest of it, and we have Sauron. But we're going to be moving to, almost certainly, it's going to be focused around Numenor, which is this ancient kind of Atlantis-like civilization, human civilization, and we have some information about that. We have got some stories from that, but he never wrote a book about it
Hmm.
in the same way, or a novel in the same way he did the Lord of the Rings. So what we have are bits of information that they have to legally, they have to stick to those bits of information. That's canon. They can't change that. The names of the kings, the what happened in the history, those things they have to stick to. But they have got a much greater liberty to create and craft a story around those facts that kind of brings them together as they want to. This is not going to be like the movies. The movies
Hmm.
were adaptations of the books,
Hmm.
and they tweaked a few things here and there, but they were pretty faithful adaptations of the books. This is not that. This is they've given rights to 3,441 years worth of Tolkien history, and they've said, okay, in that, here's a few dozen pages of bits of history that you cannot change. Other than that, go for your life, do what you want. So we're seeing a much wider, much broader kind of creative mandate than we got for the movies.
Yeah, and I think that's smart because who else is better at being me than myself, right? So it's like, the trilogy for the most part please the masses and even at the diehard, but you always take that chance. But if you're going to convert to a visual medium, it's better to take these cliff notes. And it speaks to his prowess in creating these sub worlds, right? And why he took it up, because the moralistic and ethical issues and ideology in which are invoked in this class system, within the hobbits, the elves, and so forth, they play a part in this, and you can make a story within those constructs. And I think that Tolkien was brilliant in that. That's why you have this book right here from George. He knows to do Fire and Blood because he saw what Tolkien did with the Silmarillion, right? Like, he knows how to go about it. And when Tolkien never officially published that, right? Like, that was
That
after.
that was his son Christopher who pulled
Yeah.
together lots of his notes. Yeah.
Yeah, so but he knows the value in creating these off-world stories and connections. So I guess it's just staying true to the sentiment in a macro sense, and you don't have to try to appease the masses. I've always said this. It's like if you, like with Dune right now. I was talking to my friend John from Cortex Video, that's from your neck of the woods, yesterday, and I said, if you're gonna make Dune and you don't think you can do anything other than just satisfy the book readers, then why are you making it? You know what I mean? Like, as a film. If there's nothing more than just doing it to the visual medium for profit, which, yes, it's a business sense, but if there's nothing that you read in a book that you think this would be great on screen, this would be really well conveyed through this medium, then why the hell are you doing it? Because the best chance you have is just breaking even, right? Like, you just didn't piss anybody off. So there's parts and aspects of these stories, and I think that Tolkien created a world that allows us to embrace this story that is coming to us from Amazon, and hopefully it's good. I hope to God they don't try to be Game of Thrones. Game of Thrones didn't try to be Lord of the Rings, right? They didn't try to be the
Yeah.
Fellowship.
I mean, what I would say to that though is that the wonder of the films, the movies, and the Lord of the Rings, was that they were very faithful. But when they needed to tweak things, they did tweak things. They took out characters like Tom Bombadil. Lots of the fans were like, "Oh, they took out Tom Bombadil," but actually, he didn't really fit into a film world. It was he was very much a kind of a novel character. He added stuff in for the book, and then they do tweak. So stuff like the Battle of Helm's Deep, for example, there were quite a few changes from the books, but they made it visually work really, really well, and that is now, almost the standard for like a medieval fantasy battle is the Battle of Helm's Deep. So yes, you can, and there's a sort of a fine line where you have to uh, treat the source material with respect, but also adapt it in a way that makes it work for the new medium. Now, what the other thing I would say just on that, what they did, I thought brilliantly with the Lord of the Rings movies was that they actually engaged with the hardcore fans right from the very beginning, and they listened to them. So, for example, there's this Arwen, who Liv Tyler did a brilliant job. Her role is slightly beefed up from the books. She doesn't appear huge amounts in the books. She just appears a little bit, and they wanted to have her with a slightly bigger role. Some things the fandom were like, oh, okay, fair enough. She took a role that Glorfindel did in the books. Fine, we don't mind that. But then there was one point where she appeared at the Battle of Helm's Deep, whereas in the books she didn't at all. And the fans were like, well, should she be there? No, actually, you know what? We don't think so. And they cut her out. They just went through and they cropped the sections where she was in that battle to respect the fans' wishes, because it wasn't that important. They realized they just took one step too far, just to have this character who had
Fan
absolutely no
service.
reason to be there, just to exactly. But they were inventing in filming it originally. They were thinking they were doing fan service, but actually the fans were like, you know what? No, this doesn't make sense. So there's a fine line, and I think the impression I get with Dune is that they are engaging with the fans, and that is so overdue a great adaptation because it's such a fantastic book or series of books. And I think they've got the right person holding it, to be honest.
Oh, Denny Vanu. Yeah, we did him on one of the previous episodes with John from your neck of the woods, just graduated from East Anglia with his film theory degree, his production degree. And yeah, I definitely think that you have to say there's a reason. Just as you watch like Game of Thrones, you watch Game of Thrones and you think, oh man, this is so much better in the books. Yes, because of the internal dialogue and stuff like that. Like, of course, like you get more into the thoughts. It's not a visual medium. You can have the internal monologues. But like at the same time, when you're reading a book, every single time you think, man, this would be better on screen, right? Like it's give and take. So I think that's a really good example. And thank you for that example that you brought up with Liv Tyler. Because they were like, okay, so this is somebody everybody likes. That's like putting Robb Stark not dying at the Red Wedding, pretty much, and just injecting him. So, right, I mean, a little hyperbolic, but along the lines of that would be like, yeah, because the fans would be like, no, that's not faithful. He dies at the Red Wedding. He can't be at the Battle of King's Landing at the end and then die there, like, because this is like a launching off point for this and that. So it's like, respect the medium, but also realize where the opportunity lies. Because if there's not an opportunity other than that fiscal opportunity, then you shouldn't be doing it. And I really appreciate that they're going with the second age, right?
They are, yeah.
Yeah, I think that's brilliant, because I don't know what the second age is all about. Guess what? I want to know. I concept, right?
And you should. And just to give a little bit of a teaser here, the second age is when the rings were forged. Mm-hmm. So we're definitely going to be getting like the origin story of the One Ring and the other rings that are there. And also, this is when we get Sauron, who in the Lord of the Rings, he's just this kind of like, he's the eye, isn't he? And you just go, whoa, what's going on there? When in the second age, he was this immensely powerful person who could take on different physical forms, and he had huge charisma, and he is, short version, he is sexy Sauron. He can go off and he can seduce people, and he can manipulate people, and it's going to be he's going to be such an antagonist. There is no way around this. This is all going to be revolving around quite how astonishingly good at being bad Sauron is.
Yeah, and like Tony Teflon said, Helm's Deep is one of the greatest battles I've ever seen on screen. Ragnar Lothbrok, pretty damn good Helm's Deep, top 5 medieval. I mean, come on, this is after the age of like your basic, I'm just gonna say it's my basic bitch CGI that they used in the films, which these films still hold up. Like I just watched all 3 within the last 6 months, and I was, and I wasn't watching it to do this. I was just watching it to enjoy it. you know, like, and there is a difference for us content creators, you know, we have to watch this or that. But no, I wasn't like tasked with doing it. I enjoyed it. And I know it sounds stupid and petty, and it kind of is. But no, I just watched it it was on Netflix. Each of the films, like, had a period of time, which they're on Netflix or Hulu, whichever one it was, but I watched them and I enjoyed them. Like, I liked it. You know, like, Game of Thrones stepped up the CGI and it did visual effects a little bit better, but they're still enjoyable. So this second age will lead us to a better understanding of the works that are already in place, right? Like, so we have this contemporary work that we can build off of. And I think that's brilliant. So we have also Sexy Saran be my new Twitter handle. You get it up, Ragnar. Harry Pants. You get it up. I know you asked earlier about that. How much did Tolkien steal, or was he inspired about the Anglo-Saxon or Nordic tales? I think Beowulf, without a doubt, was a huge inspiration to him, or how he saw these mythological tales, the monomyths be conveyed, and he saw the power in creation stories. But I think he took them a little bit further, and he did quite a few. He did more than one essay on Beowulf alone. And like I said, within these American contemporary education systems, we are in ninth grade. I don't know if that transfers over for you guys. But yeah, we have to read Beowulf, and Tolkien is the reason for that, and there's a foundation behind it. So like, Tolkien hated himself, some people that are getting meaning from his works, but he loved himself some critiquing of Beowulf, and you gotta love him. I love a little bit of contradiction because we all had it. So you know, like, but it wasn't unfair. He just loved. I think he did 3 essays. I'd have to look to be sure. For sure, 2. There are 2 separate, like, really long ass essays about Beowulf alone that he did, and I think they're fascinating, and it just shows his enthusiasm. It's just like George wouldn't have written, most likely, the things he wrote if it wasn't for Tolkien. Tolkien wouldn't have written what he wrote if it wasn't for these Nordic sagas and these other monomyths he embraced. So definitely. What's going on, Sunflower Beth? Thank you so much. All 2 of my favorite YouTubers here. Well, yeah. So I really appreciate that. I mean, I know it's Robert. It's just In Deep Geek. You know what I mean? No, but I'm really happy to have you on here, because you're one of the few A Song of Ice and Fire people that I really feel like that this transition, because you are transitioning. You're not forgetting about the winds. The winds will still blow past you, and you'll get the winds of winter, and you'll be covering that as well. But you really have always been the go-to, for me at least, for Lord of the Rings, The Fellowship, and so forth. If you look at Robert's Instagram, I would have to imagine Tolkien would approve.
Well, I hope so. Perhaps not my big Spider-Man poster that I put up there today, but
well, that's
generally,
bullshit.
that's
bullshit. We
can
all,
I do have a lot of pictures that would probably fit well in the Shire. Just if I pick up, actually, if I could,
do whatever you need.
When you talk about Beowulf, it's not just that he wrote essays about Beowulf. He taught it. This was his day job. He was a professor. He taught students about it, and legendarily, if you just picture in your mind what J.R.R. Tolkien looks like, apparently first year undergraduate students gathering there for their first lecture on classics from the legendary Professor Tolkien, and they were all there in the Oxford Lecture Theatre. And apparently what he used to do at the beginning of every course was he would just, once everyone had gathered, he'd just silently, without a word, walk to the front, turn around, face them all, and go, "Whyat!" and then launch into, from memory, that's Whyat being the opening word of Beowulf, just launch into reciting Beowulf. And that was the first lesson, was just him reciting Beowulf to get across to them this idea that this isn't just some academic text. This is a story to be lived and breathed and understood, and to feel the impact of it. And so he loved story, and he saw it not just as a sort of a written medium, but something could be spoken. And I think, although he had quite a complicated relationship with all the different people wanting to adapt his work, I think that he would have loved the idea that people were adapting what he did and telling the story anew in a new way. So I think that, yeah, that just to pick up on the Beowulf thing, this isn't just him writing essays about stuff. He wanted us to live it and understand it and breathe it.
And it really, because like, I mean, I can't, say it anymore or reinforce it anymore. The power of story, storytelling animal is one of my favorite books, contemporary books on storytelling there is, and about how, people that sat around campfires that told stories. Why did they survive? They should have been getting sleep so they had more energy to go kill animals and do this, but no, they survived. And he saw the power in that. And there's a little bit of his religious spirituality that plays into that. He definitely thinks that, if you are to tell stories like the scriptures will come to fruition. So, you see the double-edged sword that he worked with. He had an atheist pal that he's like, hey, come on, come over to my side. Then he came over to his side, but a different sect of his side, and he took a little bit of issue with it. It wasn't, let's not get into it, but the point is, he saw the importance and the power of story. And if we can stand behind any of the work that we do here on this platform and we deny their power behind story, why the hell are we doing what we're doing right now? Why the hell are we talking about this if there's actually nothing to it, if it's just fun? No, he saw it as more as fun. Like you said, he started every single lecture with, I can't do it like you'll do it. But he did that because it was impactful. He did it because it's powerful, because it's more than just further education or being an intellect or being this literary critique, having this prowess of that we see with Roger and Ebert in the 80s and 90s, and now we see with literary analysis. No, he saw power in story, meaning forming culture, society, and world, and he made sure to take it off. So for better or worse, he knew it was powerful. It really is. It's something I really admire about him. And I think that the way in which he worked was slow, just like another fellow we know. Won't name his name. But it wasn't, it wasn't a Stephen King situation. It wasn't streamlined as much, but he took a lot of time with it. And he saw the beauty in language. He was a philologist. He was an etymologist. He studied start a language, what language means, meaning like how you speak is how you feel. And he truly took that to a new level, because when we think and we dream how we speak. The words we use embody sentiment. There's not a lot of power in that. He took that off-world as well. George was smart enough to know he wasn't a philologist. He's like, I'll go get somebody to do Dothraki. But he knew to do it. Valerian and all that, it was created by linguists. And he subcontracted that out. And I actually respect the hell out of that. I really do. Because it's like knowing what you're good at, and respecting the medium. And knowing when to say, well, no, let's have somebody else do this. But his mom told him that there couldn't be the green great dragon, right? At one point. It had to be was it the great green dragon or a green great dragon? It's the order of adjectives. It's the order of adjectives, but take note that his 7-year-old self had his mother, when he had his story, my mom would have been like, oh, good job, Justin. His mom was like, didn't follow the laws of adjectives right there. You put opinion before fact. But that's important, and that enticed him, and he started to think about it, and he started to think, hey, not only is the way we tell stories important, but the words that we use and the words that we culturally adapt to mean a lot, and it changes the way we think. The order of adjectives and all that. That's why he is a linguist, why he's a philologist, and there's really nobody like him today, and everybody just takes bits and pieces as we can. And they're not better, they're not worse, but I really appreciate the hell out of, Tolkien really stands above and beyond any other author, in my opinion. I'd like to see what Tolkien would do these days if he would be a screenwriter. Do you think he would? Do you think he'd venture over? It's all hypothetical, people.
No, I don't think so. He was fundamentally, he was an academic. That was the world that he was happy in, and writing was it was a side passion that he did. His main thing was teaching, learning, understanding language. And when he was writing things like The Lord of the Rings, I mean, even legendarily, obviously, with The Hobbit, how he first started writing The Hobbit was he was marking papers. And when he was marking papers, there was a blank piece of paper there. He got a little bit bored and he scribbled down on it, in a hole in the ground there lived a hobbit. And from that came The Hobbit. But it was while he was marking papers. That was his life. Being an academic, studying, learning, and teaching was what he was about. And then from that flowed this world that he created. So no, I don't think he would be a professional writer in any way. I think he would still be an academic. It's just that perhaps He would approach things in a slightly different way these days. I hope he wouldn't actually. I hope that today he would probably he was many great things, but he also was quite a stick in the mud and liked the old way of doing things. So I suspect he probably would be the equivalent of George R. R. Martin typing away at one of those whatever ridiculously old sort of typewriter.
Robert knows
thing
nothing about technology. Anytime I try to explain anything new about it, and you're brilliant in your own way. It's DOS, it's WordStar. Yeah, rightfully so. Yes, no, exactly. You're right. Yeah, exactly. But no, I think that speaks to why you're so good at what you do. Focus on what you're good at. And when I say, I'm like, I got to run this on OBS, or Justin, shut up. I'm like, all right. Got it. But Tony Teflon, well, yeah, you have no care for it. Tony, and you should.
I don't tell you to shut up. I just have no idea how to work it.
He's much more polite. He's always polite. Don't. Question from Tony Teflon: what are you hoping to see in the new Lords of the Rings series? What do you think will be done right, Robert?
What I'm hoping to see is the downfall of Numenor. That's what I want. I want so the backstory that we know is that Sauron allows himself to be captured, short version, by the people of Numenor, starts off in a prison and then works his way up through society to the point at which he is the person who is telling the king what to do. I love that idea of seeing the rise of somebody from the very bottom all the way up to the very top simply through their ability to manipulate people. The other thing that I'm very keen on is that we know, I mentioned a bit ago, this is the world of the start of the rings. The 9 rings given to mortal men are out there, and 3 of them were given to Numenorians. So what I'm really looking forward to is the fact that 3 of the ring wraiths, 3 of the Nazgul, the Black Riders, before they become that, will be on this show. I'm absolutely convinced of it, and we're going to see people descending down into becoming that, whilst at the same time having all the powers of those rings at their disposal. And that is something I'm really looking forward to.
Yeah, and I think that it's wonderful that we're going to get adaptation, and I think it's so smart, high concept wise. We're entering into the House of the Dragon era, thank God. And where we look to have a pretty good story that's developing. Don't believe all the plot leaks. They have not started filming. Everybody, trust me, they have not started filming. A working title, please dismiss at all times, unless you like Snakes on the Plane and stop looking into it. It has an official title as well. It's House of the Dragon, not Red Gun. But anyways, yeah, no, we are in an era where we are posed to have quite a few really, really high quality fantasy series, and this kind of, will dovetail us, will kind of bookend us to, the where we started from. And it's like Tolkien was all about that. He was all about telling stories that are relevant for the time, telling stories that also are timeless, meaning they are truth devoid of fact. And I really appreciate that about him. I think that his study of language is fascinating to me, because the way in which we speak, like I've spoken about before, conveys sentiment and stuff like that. So his ability to have like that forethought and actually look at storytelling in a more complex way and have the prose that he does, I think like he's up there with Hemingway. I really think that he's a special author. And he did have a lot of success in his time. There's that ongoing tale about he only wrote for his kids. That's not necessarily true. It was competitive with the Inklings, right? I'd like to just get this final insight from you, because it's like we all kind of like live in this era, right? Where we're with other YouTubers and we all love each other, of course. But, it's kind of there's some competition out there. So it's like this competition between him and Lewis and everybody else within the Inklings. Like, what do you take from that? Because he obviously was, in my opinion, and this is history after the fact, right? We can speak about his prowess and linguistics and all this, and he's a philologist and all this, etymology, blah, blah, blah. But that's because he's got all these successes. It's like he was intellectually, it's seemingly more sufficient than the rest. But he had competition, right? The Inklings was like a group of YouTubers at a much higher level at Oxford. It really, I'm making it all allegorical, but I want to hear your take on this. I think he thrived off that. He was very, very sensitive. I've read all of his letters with Lewis. He was sensitive as hell. If you start a book with "this is an allegory," listen, you're sensitive about what you're saying, and I think that's something we all deal with, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think I've got a slightly different perspective on this. I don't view this as competition, either as YouTubers or within the Inklings. In terms of the Inklings, they were a writing group
Mm-hmm.
effectively, and so what that means is that they would come along and they would read stuff to each other, and then they would critique it, and they would critique it in the aim of helping each other.
They
And so,
shamed him though. They did shame
yeah,
him.
absolutely, because it was that if you've ever been in like a proper critique group for something,
Mm-hmm.
and you get people who they don't pull any punches because they cared about each other,
Yes.
because they wanted each other to succeed. And that, I think, is where the difference is that I don't think this was competitiveness per se. I think this was wanting each other to succeed. um, Tolkien was quite castigating about C.S. Lewis's approach and the way that he wrote Narnia, not because he wanted to do him down, but because he thought he could do better. He
Mm-hmm.
knew that Tolkien, that Lewis was an astonishingly good writer. Of course, he is. We all know he is. His works have survived half a century or more. He clearly was an exceptionally good writer. It's just that Tolkien thought that he could do better, and so that, I think, is that the feel that we get from the Inklings is that this is a writing group where everyone was pushing each other to do better.
And I like that, because I think, and you've always, what is it, the term you use? You've given me unsolicited advice, and I always
Yeah,
appreciate that. I have spread that to everybody that I collab with. I said, tell me, please do, because I don't want to hear it was good if it wasn't, and that's really something that's important. But you definitely, there is a competitive sense, which I think is healthy. Also, I think he kind of feels like a Frankenstein, a little bit of a um paradox with Lewis, that he created a believer and it wasn't a believer in quite his sense. So he had a little bit of an issue with the way in which he conveyed his thoughts, but at the same time, you couldn't help to think that he was proud. I mean, because Narnia, and I've always been wondering if you ever will cover it in the Well Told Tale, or do it.
So the Well Told Tale, for the moment, for those who don't know, the Well Told Tale is my second channel. That's my audio narration channel. I'm a huge fan of the classics of science fiction and fantasy, and I am audio narrating what I consider to be the seminal works, the finest works of science fiction and fantasy ever. So we've been working our way through H.G. Wells, Lovecraft, Poe, Frankenstein, things like this.
Yeah.
In terms of C.S. Lewis and also Tolkien, we get into rights issues with these things. I am actively now going out and trying to find things that I can buy the rights for, but uh, when it comes to things like C.S. Lewis or Tolkien, as you said earlier, in order to get the rights for the second age of Middle-earth, which is not even the one that everybody knows about, that cost them a
A
quarter of a
bill.
billion
Yeah.
dollars.
Yeah.
I do not have a quarter of a billion dollars to buy the rights to be reading the stories of Lord of the Rings. So what there are some authors, unfortunately, at the moment, until their works become public domain, I cannot be covering on the Well Told Tale. But there are so many astonishing authors that I can, that this isn't a
Mm.
problem yet, that I can carry on. I mean, I've just been finishing Sinbad, absolute classics. If you've never read Sinbad and just thought, yeah, I feel I should know what the story of Sinbad the Sailor is, that's the kind of thing that we can cover. So yeah, there are so many fantastic stories out there.
Yeah, I just want to do a quick plug for the Well Told Tale. I obviously was editor for it at first. You moved into a podcast, which I am
You are.
very thankful for, because that's always the direction I saw it going. And I've always explained you as somebody that has a respect for literature, story. I don't think, like, I read a lot of books about books. I read a lot about how to write, and that you read. And you really read. I really embrace that, and I think that your knowledge is authentic, organic, whatever you want to call it, and it just comes from a place that's that it's true. And the Well Told Tale is a great place, and also you try to be timely within those constraints, right? Like you did Alice in Wonderland when Westworld was out and stuff like that. So check it out, guys, if you haven't. We got some super chats here from Amberlyn, my crutch. Just saying, I love you guys. I learned so much from you all, so thank you. Give our community here well, you inspire us, Amberlyn, and like I said, you just one webcam away from inspiring others. It doesn't take a lot. So, and morally, thank you so much. I met you during Westworld, and you stuck with us, and thank you for supporting this and everything else. Just shows support. I can't thank you enough. I know you're on the front lines there being a nurse, and thank God for people like you during this time. So it's been a while since I've been with Robert, and I can't thank you enough, my friend. I can't, really say anything other than just really look forward to you covering Lord of the Rings, no matter what it is. I know you got Winds covered, but when it comes to where I go to for learning about Silmarillion, which you just had a stream about 2 days ago or a day ago, or anything like that, it's a comfort. We get used to certain people, and we trust certain people. I can tell you from an editor point of view, which also I am offering my editing services to everybody, that, this guy truly loves literature. There's no gimmick behind it. Trust me. Glacier is something he says as an American. I say glacier, but I love to hear Robert speak about literature in general. And it doesn't come from some contrived or unnatural or not organic place. It is a true love and a true understanding that only comes from repetitive consumption, which I don't know. I can't sell you any better, my friend, because I don't really think I need to sell you. You're always a blast to have on and a good guy to be around. So, I look forward to this, and I think that this series is going to be good. I think that it's going to be something different. It's good that they're not rehashing things, right?
Absolutely, and thank you for that.
Except for the Glacier thing, is one of the things that caught me.
Well,
I was like, Glacier. I was like, you British son of a bitch there.
Well, I apologize for my pronunciation.
No, it's much better than mine. Trust me.
But it's always a pleasure to be on here. As I say, I said at the beginning, we've collaborated on and off 2-3 years now, and it's always a pleasure to be here. You're an absolute standout member of this community, and you just keep on plugging away and creating the great content. So thank you so much for all that you do.
Yeah, and we'll link everybody, and I appreciate it. And thank you, Susan Dunkel, another one of my... I just want to say thank you to my Patreons. I've been trying to provide notes. Now, this one, it's not on Robert, because to be honest with you guys, I'm feeling burnout. This is the 10th week. This is getting to be hard to do. We're probably going to end it in 2 weeks and give a podcast release for you Patreons first. But this has really informed me, and I hope that it's been helpful for you guys to look at different ways in which we tell stories, from visual mediums to literary mediums. So I think that Robert is a perfect person to have on, especially for Tolkien, to look at the written word and say, what are they conveying? Look at prose, look at the way in which they have their cadence, explored. And I think that it's something that we all can learn from, because we can stop saying things like the books are better, or the films are better, or the show is better. No. Was it good? Was it enjoyable? Content is a sponge that we squeeze joy out of. We have properties we all love. That's the reason we put a webcam up and buy an expensive microphone, is to get more love out of it. And Robert is one of those people that can squeeze more joy out of it for you. And I hope I am as well. So that's what it's all about. We're probably taking a break after AAU Pack Mules, because I need to, every filmmaker every single week, it's quite the task. So I've made it 10 weeks straight. We're going to go 12, and we'll do it. We have Vanessa Cole coming on for Stephen King, which I can't think of a better person, right, for Stephen King. Does it end with a demon? Yeah, it ends with a demon. Don't worry about it. But yes, no, Stephen King is one of those people, especially George R. R. Martin. Watch an excellent interview with him and Stephen King. Stephen King doesn't understand how George doesn't finish stories, and George doesn't understand how Stephen King finishes 3 before breakfast. So yeah, but they both respect the hell out of each other, and they both have their different critiques and so forth. So no, you guys are the best, and I just hope that if you watch something like this, you can look at the content that's already available to you, meaning the mediums, the books, films, the television series, and you find more out of them. Because in a time like this, that's what we need. And I can't recommend Robert's channel enough. We're all very aware of it, but Thursday is your daily weekly stream, right?
That's right. There's a question from Susan Dunkel, actually, that I'm very happy to very quickly pick up. Susan, you were asking about whether they cast Melkor as well as Sauron. You get confused by the timelines. Yeah, everyone gets confused by the timelines, so don't worry about that. The short answer is no. Melkor, for those who do not know, was basically Sauron's master back in the day. So if Sauron's the big baddie, then Melkor's the big baddie. But no, so he's a first age character. He, at the end of the first age, then he sort of gets cast down into the void. So he will not appear unless they get the rights to do like mega flashbacks, which I very much doubt. Then he's not going to be appearing. So we're just going to be getting Sauron as the bad guy in this one, who is probably going to be, they haven't confirmed this yet, but it seems very likely, Joseph Maul, who was the guy who played Benjen Stark.
Oh, Benjen. So, no, yeah. So you at the first age, second age, and the third age, they've only have rights for the second age as of right now. So you will have a slightly younger or less equipped Sauron, right?
You're going to get Sauron at the height of his powers, basically. Yes, he's a bit young, but he's, if you imagine Sauron as being an angelic being, ageless and timeless, this is before he loses his ability to take on a physical form.
Okay.
So this is, he's at his
this is his peak, actually. Okay.
Pretty much, yeah.
The opposite, what have I said? Yeah, so he's at his peak. But that's another thing that I love about Tolkien there, is that, with elves especially, they don't age until they choose to age and all that. So it's a whole nother character dynamic that we're not, used to. So, George is grounded, and, George's characters, like I said, they produce tales that poets and bards will sing about. But like Rob Stark said, no one will be alive to hear them. So, but Tolkien gives you those tales in a poetic way that I think are very beautiful, and the more and more you read them, trust me, there's layers. If there was basic stuff, people wouldn't like it. Like George wouldn't be inspired by it, everybody else wouldn't be inspired. So yeah, I think that I'm really looking forward to Lord of the Rings from Amazon. But more so, just go to audible.com, which I have my affiliate link in the information below. Do a free trial. If you do a free trial, that does give me money. You don't have to continue it on. I'll be straight up with it. It is what it is, but also go to Robert's channel, because I know you have Amazon affiliate links, right? For all these books.
I do, yeah. I mean, if you want to just go to any video on my channel, then I've got some affiliate links. Yeah, absolutely.
If you're going to buy a book, get your membership through me, and then go to Robert's channel and use that. But no, I mean, do it. I mean, if you're gonna get it. So yeah, I can't thank you enough, Robert. I look forward to Westworld in 13 years. No. So anything you'd like to tell people about what you got coming up?
I mean, not especially. If you don't know my channel is called In Deep Geek. I cover Game of Thrones, A Song of Ice and Fire, as well as Lord of the Rings. I will be covering, I covered The Witcher and a few other exciting things. I'm considering doing The Wheel of Time, so let me know if you're interested in that. But from now on, for the next half year or so, definitely my main two focuses are going to be A Song of Ice and Fire stuff. Looking forward to The Winds of Winter, which will definitely at some point happen. And also unpacking The Lord of the Rings. What is in this world that we've got going on? So I've got a whole series of videos on that already, and they'll be coming more and more over the coming months.
Yeah, in his live streams, definitely check him out, because he's been collaborating with the best of that fandom as well, and establishing yourself, which is something I really look up to, and I appreciate that you bring in the best minds from the established, genre, and you're going in there, and you are our segue, my friend. You are the segue for it. So I love the hell out of it. That's why you're here. And yeah, make sure to subscribe. We will be doing Stephen King next week, and then I one more episode after that. In the Dark video is coming out. They have managed to do what time travel has never managed to do. They've dealt with the paradox better, and I'm trying to get a video that is comprehensive, a video that is concise, and a video that really, really depicts the prowess in which these writers seemingly stumbled upon. They had two stories. They had a procedural, and then they had a time travel story. Netflix optioned them, and they said, I guess we'll put them together. And they managed to make the best time travel story in our time. So yeah, I'm really looking to highlight that, and I've been trying to for the last 3 weeks. I'm not alone, because if you notice, all the other videos on Dark really aren't that comprehensive. They go through the Easter eggs and stuff like that. It's a tough thing to do, but they managed to stumble on this glory in this very efficient way to tell a story that's meaningful in a non Back to the Future way. So Robert from In Deep Geek, Back to the Future is great. No hate. Make sure to subscribe. Make sure to go and get all these books, and keep an eye out, guys. We got 2 more of these, and we'll keep them coming. They will be converted to podcast first for my lovely Patreons. Thank you guys so much for supporting creativity. My name's Justin Thomas. Thank you so much, Robert, and we will see you soon.
Take care. Thank you.